us. Because you were home.
So, this next part is what I like to call In Defense of the Strangers. Now, to me, when I think of the lineage of the masked maniac movies, it begins with the film Psycho. From there, the next step in the evolution of that genre that combined all elements of films before it. The successor to Halloween, or to Psycho, would be Halloween. Unfortunately, here's where things took a downturn. Because there was not attempt to emulate any of the core elements, any of the key constituent parts of Halloween, of what made it work. There was just an ambition to copy its formula. The films that came out after Halloween, I'm sorry to say, they were formulaic. So we go from Psycho to Halloween to, unfortunately, Friday the 13th. I say unfortunately because, sadly, Halloween was not a situation of, copying Psycho. It was inspired by Psycho, and it pushed a lot of the elements that came from that film forward while adding some of its own. However, once you get to Friday the 13th, it's like making a copy of a copy in terms of diminishing quality. And unfortunately, it is Friday the 13th that's still 43 years later, has become the standard bearer for the modern slasher genre. We are so very far. It amuses me whenever people try to give the slasher genre any type of credence. It amuses me in the worst possible way how far removed the slasher genre is from the likes of Psycho, from the likes of Halloween, because it's almost not even a copy of a copy. It's almost a bastard child, just because the standards, the stakes, the quality has diminished so very much. Having said that, this film, The Strangers, is the closest that these movies have come to Hitchcockian suspense that I almost forgot that The Strangers is technically a slasher film. That just goes to show how much damage slasher slapstick and gratuitous gore has done to its own film class. That when you get a film like The Strangers that uplifts the material head and shoulders above its peers while getting back in touch with its roots of key ingredients, in this case being the nail-biting suspense and borderline stalker paranoia, it feels totally divorced from its native genre. Normally, I don't give a good goddamn about Rotten Tomatoes scores, but this particular film, The Strangers, holds an approval rating of 48% based on 165 reviews, with an average rating of 5.1 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads as follows. The Strangers has a handful of genuinely scary moments, but they're not enough to elevate the end results above standard slasher fare. End quote. You don't know what constitutes a standard slasher fare if you're going to compare The Strangers to the likes of the My Bloody Valentine remake. As far as these reviews go, let's take a look at other unfavorable feedback, including no higher authority of horror output than Roger Ebert of Chicago Sun-Times, who gave the film a 1.5 stars out of 4, saying, "The movie deserves more stars for its bottom line craft, but All the craft in the world can't redeem its story. Why horror fans ever put so much stock into Siskel and Ebert, especially when they've clearly never been horror fans, I will never know. Keeping with this theme, Elizabeth Weitzman of the New York Daily News compared the film to 2007's Vacancy. She says, "A comparison which does strangers no favors. Vacancy director Nimrod Antal gave us a pair of heroes who fought like hell to survive, becoming closer and stronger in the effort. Bertino's undeveloped protagonists are colossally stupid and frustratingly passive." End quote. Jesus. Now, as much as I don't agree with old Lizzie here, her tempered and tranquil response, I I always give credit when it comes to sheer acerbic commentary. Lastly, we have Wesley Morris of the Boston Globe said, "The director Bertino has the pretensions of an artist and the indelicacy of a hack. He tries to get under our skin with a pile driver." A pile driver, you say? I gotta believe that these were the same reviewers praising the artistry of such cinematic contributions, the likes of torture porn and Rob Zombie's Halloween, and yet insist on hammering down the judge's gavel because of their own indignation and refined theatric standards. Now, I don't list these pedestrian commentaries because hurf my feels. Personally, I couldn't give a toss about people who don't have good taste, nor they are in possession, or nor do I care of the witless prattle of non-horror fans bloviating about a genre that they don't like and thus can't distinguish the quality from the commode. Based on these reviews, these people ain't qualified to judge a pie-eating contest, much less what constitutes good horror. I only mention these appraisals to demonstrate how poorly these takes have aged and, as a mind's eye middle finger to these trash reviewers, since this film is now regarded as a classic, as I mentioned before. This film has reached that status, whereas their slipshod commentary wasn't worth rags they were printed on. While it's easy to call any recent offerings an instant hit, I would like to expand exactly what are the makings of this classic that are on full display with this movie. I started these closing thoughts with this movie's comparison to the master of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock. Think about the voyeurism showcased here. That iconic shot of the masked intruder simply standing in the shadows behind Liv Tyler. It's a memorable movie moment where nothing's happening and yet so much happens. Consider the dread that was featured of the remote setting where this film takes place, where the home is almost a prison for the hapless couple that these unfortunate events are happening to. How many times have we seen a run-of-the-mill horror flick where you're left asking, now that the horror has ensued, why don't they just leave? Isn't it a sign of greatness and a stroke of genius that the screenwriters framed both plot and setting within the context where the worst thing that you could possibly do in this scenario is leave the house out of the impending danger that lies outside, where you don't know where the danger can come from, but you remain indoors out of sheer survival instinct. Just how often did this film slowly turn up the temperature and build on the tension until it reached its boiling point? This film, unlike the vast majority of masked maniac movies, has a little thing called atmosphere. That is such a critical element, especially to the overall identity of your film, that is far too often completely forgotten about. I would categorize The Strangers as a thriller in the absolute truest sense of the word, relying on silence over slaughter. Nowadays, you get trash marketing that actually relies on advertisement of gore because horror entertainment can't seem to supply the goods. I'm looking at you, Prey, Callisto Protocol, yes, and even Scream 6. I haven't researched enough of 70s horror to confirm this film as a throwback to that decade, but hell, if thrillers that are half as good as The Strangers hail from that era 50 years ago, they may merit a watch as far as I'm concerned. To utterly overlook this movie's key ingredients as well as the expertise with which they are managed is such a gross disservice that frankly disqualifies your criticism for the simple fact that if you can't recognize what's good, who the hell are you to denounce what is bad? Best leave that up to the professionals. In terms of genre-specific veneration and modern reappraisals, in 2009, this film was ranked number 13 on Bravo's 13 Scarier Movie Moment television piece. And in 2018, in a 2018 retrospective, Clark Collis of Entertainment Weekly deemed the film a modern slasher classic. The AV Club named it number 23 in their best horror films made since 2000. So, and, you know, who am I to deny that? I, for one, absolutely agree. It's the weirdest thing to me. Of all of the films that I have given a second chance viewing, or for those of you watching, a first chance viewing, for all the times that I've sat in front of this microphone and attempted to explain why it is that said film that I am reviewing or live streaming is worth a damn, again, it's the strangest conundrum that The Strangers is understood as a classic, yet there are people that confoundingly don't like it or they think that it's too dour. I think that's a problem with your taste, not the movie. So, mark your calendars and say your prayers. I've been Inkarnate, offering a word of caution. Fear the worst, so long you recognize who's best. If you're resigned to your fate, time to subscribe to your fears.